Hey, zoom back to Cocky Gachas, and in this video we're going to review a tier list that just came out a couple days ago to see what we can learn from it and what units are especially strong in other people's mind. Let's dive right in. So right now we're on the preview website, and I also link it in the description below if you guys want to check it out for yourselves later. Right, this is a very useful resource that I've been referring to also, so credits to them for coming up with a tier list for the mid-game section, PvE mid-game section. Right, they also have a tier list for the early game section, but personally I feel like the early game, as they define it, to chapters 9, right, itself, it blinks, or rather you can go through it in a blink of an eye. Pretty much, even if you play casually, you can go like clear it in a week or two, right? So definitely you're able to go through it very easily. So I don't think it's needed tier list for early game itself. So we try to plan more towards the mid-late game, and that's why this is going to be useful. And as they call it, this is going to cover chapters 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? So we only have 15 chapters, but they are calling it mid-game because we are also going to be expecting more chapters to come out, whereby that is going to be the true end game, where we need all our characters to be at origin subsequently. So this tier list is bound to change, so disclaimer, don't take it as that this will be the sacred list going into end game, right? Maybe it will change. They also did put in a disclaimer to say that the units that are underwhelming right now, they might start shining in the ultra late game, because damage over time on units that have a lot of HP, right, is going to be more significant compared to raw damage perhaps in the late game. So that's something to take into consideration before moving into the tiers. So first up on the list, we have the SSS tiers, right, which means they are the best of the best. And in this tier itself, there are 4 units, and of course I'm going to speak on those units that I have experience with using, right? So Adrian is not something that I have experience using, and most likely people that are using Adrian in this tier itself, they either are ultra lucky, right? I think more likely they are whales. So I don't think this is in the realm of free-to-play players. But yeah, if you are a mini spender, you're a mid spender, right, probably have Adrian, you are able to use it probably at legend level, right? But if you only have 1 copy of Adrian, I'm not sure how good it is. Personally, haven't used it, but opponents' Adrians are pretty annoying. And the best part of Adrian is the hook, whereby it's able to hook the backline unit, right? So a lot of stages whereby we can't really clear because there's a strong backline unit like the Prim or DPS unit that is hiding behind, where you kind of have to use Jacqueline, but Adrian might be a better choice here, so definitely strong. So going to next one, we have Catherine. Catherine we do have, and in fact I've already leveled it up or ascended it to Legend Plus. So the reason why I think Catherine is so strong in these stages is because take note that the opponents have a lot of CP, right? They have much higher CP than you. And the best thing that you can do to take no damage is first immunity, invincibility, and evasion. So immunity here, like invincibility here, is very strong, and Catherine is the one that provides this. Very strong healer and decently tanky, so that's why I think it really deserves a spot. SSS tier, you can see in chapters 10 to 15 when it was only SS tier in early game, because the monster is going to hit, or the enemies is going to hit a lot harder, right? So having invincibility even more valuable. Next up, we have the Naya, and I don't really need to speak volumes on Naya, right? If you guys have seen my free-to-play clears, you do know that I rely a lot on the friend Naya to clear a lot of those clears. And in fact, I would say that without that friend Naya, I probably would be stuck at those tiers unless I have a separate renter unit, right? But even then, I feel like Naya is one of those more reliable ones. It can do damage, it can sleep, CC, all in one package, right? Very strong unit. So it really deserves its spot on this SSS tier, I think, without doubt. And then next one we have is the Talia. So Talia itself, I feel like Talia, the reason why it's so OP is because it deals with mana, right? So it's a bit like a haste mechanic like the Vivi, but mana gives you more, like it allows you to use your main skill faster, which in turn allows you to use ultimate faster, right? And we all know that sometimes one ultimate use, right, earlier before your units just die off, right, you are able to turn the tides a lot of times and clear some stages that you get stuck with just that additional boost of mana regen. So I feel like Talia, it's going into the mid-late game, is still going to be very strong. Mana is a mechanic that I feel in a lot of this kind of games, right, it's essential, and that's why I think it deserves a spot in SSS tier. And I'm also going to talk a lot more about Talia in the upcoming banner, right? I might say for it as well. So moving on to SS tier, I feel that Chloe might deserve a spot in SSS tier. Honestly, I've been using Chloe so much that I realized that it's when it drops below the 30%, right, that key factor when it drops below the 30% for the first time, or 35%, I'm not too sure, I forgot. But when it drops low for the first time, it is able to tank through so much and heal so much, such that it's able to effectively get a second life, so to speak, right? So a lot of strong enemies, right, you're able to just tank through it, and then your DPS can then carry you moving forward. So I feel like Chloe is very strong. The knockdown is also incredibly strong compared to some of the other tanks, right? I think Clara's is just a heal, right? But the inbuilt like passive heal mechanic, as well as the knockdown itself, is really very, very invaluable. So I think that it might be on SSS tier, but yeah, maybe in the coming stages Chloe can't tank as much, I'm not too sure. But moving forward, we are going to talk about Claire. The advantage over Chloe, right, I feel that is that it's not that it's exceptionally strong as a healer or rather a tanker. It is strong, don't get me wrong, but I feel that the most important mechanic is that it dives straight into the enemy lineup. So it disrupts the enemy lineup in a way that Chloe can't really do it, because Chloe walks normally, right? But Claire dashes into it. So a lot of time you can displace the enemy's lineup. You can effectively draw a lot of focus fire on you while you try to get the DPS do work, right? Jacqueline can benefit a lot from a Claire dashing in as well. So I feel that's why it's so strong. And then next we also have the Memphi. To be honest, I feel like I don't use Memphi that much. Even though I have like 6 copies of Memphi, I'm not planning to make it Legendary Plus ahead of Catherine. I think I'm going to use Catherine a lot more. I'm not too sure why. It might also be because that usually when it comes to a Memphi, I'm able to run a good Memphi if I want to, right? Most times I use my own Memphi, and it's just a support unit that I feel is very crucial, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's that necessary to ascend it, since it hides at the back, right? It don't really suffer that much, and most of the time I don't use Memphi as the key DPS, so that's why I feel that it might be on the S tier instead of SS tier. But yeah, what do I know, right? Going into chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, so that's what they think. It's on SS tier, it's up to them. Next one, we have Vivi. So a lot of people claim that Vivi, right, after getting the nerf itself, they really undervalue Vivi to say that, hey, the only reason why Vivi is super strong is because it has a crazy bugged AoE ulti, right? That is one of the good reasons why it's strong. It does a lot of damage, right? And previously it hits every single unit. That was pretty OP, and also gives a knockdown. But now that it's it's effectively fixed, right, the haste buff is still very invaluable, because you kind of need to have the first move, right, to counter some of the attacks that the opponents have, especially against Adrian. I think moving fast, right, is the one key essential to having like more effectively overrides having more HP, all these kind of things, because once you taunt the Adrian, your backline is able to survive, or your Clara can knock down the Adrian first. All these kind of small things, haste comes in clutch. So that's why I feel like deservingly SS tier, but previously it was probably SSS tier with its bug. So now moving on, we have Clara. Clara is rated as S. I think it's solid, right? S for solid, definitely quite good. The stun itself cannot be undermined, especially if you pair it with Vivi, right? It can stun so many times, and in one battle, if it survives, it can stun up to 4 or 5 times, disrupts DPS. You can help to knock down, and it also knocks the opponent into further into a lineup, so you can compress their lineup. So this is a hidden thing that, or rather it's something that people overlook, right? Compressing lineup is quite good. So yeah, that's why I think deservingly in S tier. Next we have Jacqueline. The only problem I feel with Jacqueline is that right now, using it at elite tier, sometimes I do run a legend Jacqueline also, and yet Jacqueline cannot survive, right? Even at legend tier, I've against some of the enemies, granted we are like the guide says, or like the tier list says, we're hitting above our our tier, so we are going like 60k tier CP ahead and this kind of thing. So I feel like a lot of these players, they are also hitting a lot higher than their current CP, which is why Jacqueline might not be the best idea. I feel that the only reason why it's in S tier is because it can really clutch out some scenarios or some stages where I have annoying DPS, right? But that can be fulfilled with Adrian, which is why Adrian is ranked so much higher, right? And then next we have Mariam. I tested Mariam today, and I used it against Adora. Of course, I rented it, right? I don't have Mariam myself, and I don't have it at a good ascension, even if I were to have it. So I feel that its single target ulti, single target main skill is pretty useful, especially countering Dora itself. It can, at that low HP, right, it is able to snipe off the Dora. But other than that, the ulti itself I tested, it's not that strong. So maybe I would move it to A tier. I'm not sure why they're rating it in S tier. Maybe there's something that I don't know about Mariam, but I have to test out more. Moving ahead, we have Petra. Petra, good tank, but I feel that in the early game itself, it's able to sustain a lot better. Right now, when I use Petra, it kind of doesn't do as well going into these strong hitting units, right? It doesn't really have the mechanic that the Chloe have, and in fact, it's considered more offensive as a tank. So in this later stages whereby you really want your tank to be tanky, it really isn't that good. So I think S tier is quite deservingly. Maybe I will even drop it to A tier accordingly. But yeah, that's just my opinion. I also don't have it at Legend Ascension, so maybe that's why. Next we have Prim. Prim itself has been underrated by a lot of people. I do feel that Prim can do a lot of good if it is decently ascended, as well as having enough, like if your CP discrepancy is not that high, because the Prim is more of an offensive healer compared to the rest of the healers, right? Like Catherine super defensive, the Clara is considered also super defensive, right? Prim has a very strong heal, but you do need your units to be able to survive to that stage, and most of some of his kit is still like offensive based, right? So I'm not sure how well it will do going into stages whereby the opponents are hitting really hard, where I value more on defensive ends. So next we have the A tier. So I'll briefly talk about the A tier units. Era, I don't really use it, so I can't talk much about it, but from my experience and what I've seen people say, not the best after the early game, because units are going to be are much more tanky, so your damage is not going to be that relevant. Ayame, I feel that Ayame is more of a late game unit with its DOTs, but right now in the mid game itself, a lot of people can just straight up DPS, right? It don't really need Ayame to DPS, so like the tier list says, maybe late game it will shine. So moving on to Dora. Dora's problem is that it is trying to lower its HP to increase offensive powers, but most of the time you are putting it in the tank spot. So with it so low, right, it's very susceptible to being sniped off at the start of battle. So that's why I think it's in A tier. Right, Haru, haven't used it, heard good things, but really haven't used it. I can't comment much. Jade itself, I've just put it in my level sync, and I do think Jade can be quite useful, but right now I'm only using it in the a human tower, right, because I need a 5th human unit. But other than that, I tried to slot it in a few of my runs. I can't really clear it with the Jade itself, so I need to talk a bit. And Lindsay, okay, I really think Lindsay should be in S tier, right? Just with the evasion itself, Lindsay should be in S tier. The reason why I feel that evasion is so good is because when you're hitting against units whereby you have much lower CP, evading a hit, right, just playing the RNG factor is going to be so much more like useful than compared to just straight up tanking, right? Sometimes you really can't tank it. You really need to evade and rely on luck. So that's why I feel that I might be a bit biased because I do have a Lindsay whereby I use a lot. So yeah, that's why I feel that Lindsay should be in S tier. I'm not sure why it's I mean, it's not as strong as some of these units here, right? But I feel that at least S tier, right? So yeah, Lindsay, poor thing, you're in A tier. Next we have Nicole. Nicole is starting to shine a bit more, I think, with its minus defense buff. Previously it was really sucky because you don't really need to minus defense, right? Just do raw damage. But maybe the scaling has ramped up a bit more in the later maps. And sometimes when I try to slot in Nicole, right, I can still use Nicole to clear some non-elite stages, but I feel that its usefulness might be increasing when we go to even more tanky stages, or when we have more tanky opponents whereby we do need to shred their defense, right? So Nicole might come in clutch. Next up, we have Mika and Siha. I think individually they might be in B tier, but together they should be in A tier. I have seen good things about Mika and Siha and seen people clear really a lot of stages with them. So I'm not sure why they are rated at B tier, but maybe because it's quite competitive like this list. So yeah, that's why. But I've not personally used it since the early game. So yeah, I can't really speak about it. Rebecca, I've never really used it, so I can't really speak on it. B tier might be deserving. I'm not too sure. I've not seen a lot of people talking about Rebecca, but some people have been saying it's underrated. Not too sure on that. Zuni, I feel it's really, I'm not sure what to think of it. I don't have it, but I never see people talk about it as a tank, and also as an opponent itself, it's quite underwhelming. So that's all I can speak about it. And in C tier, right, Nini opponent Wick. Haven't seen people use it past the early game, right, whereby people are using an undead team, and then like the cherry itself, I've never seen people use it. Also, the Irusha, I've seen someone talk about it on Discord, whereby they have a good experience with Irusha, but it might be because it's highly ascended, that's why they're able to pass rounds. But I've not seen good things about it. Same with Flynn, right? As an opponent, incredibly weak as well. Yeah, doesn't do good damage. Its skill also doesn't seem to be that good. And then Rainy, I used it in early game, but after that I realized it just can't do shit, and then it's not tanky enough to be considered a frontliner. It doesn't have evasion like Lindsay, which is really hurting its survivability, which is why I feel that C tier, in fact this is the last tier, right? So bottom tier, I think really fitting of Rennie. And then lastly we have Violet. After the early game, no one really uses Violet anymore, but Violet as a DOT unit, right, might shine in the late game. So that's really my my thoughts on all these units, right, and from SSS tier to C tier. Let me know in the comment section below what's your opinion on it. But just also to this, as a disclaimer, right, a lot of this also depends on your individual ascension. So you can have a Catherine at Elite, and it's not going to do as much as compared to a Clara that you have at Legendary Plus, right? So definitely consider ascensions when looking at this tier list. And strictly speaking, while you want to play good units, right, also go for your favorite units. It's going to have a lot more fun. And that about does it for today's review of the tier list posted by Pritwin.gg. So definitely check on the description below for the link if you want to check out other guides or from them, right? Definitely, it's a very, very helpful resource once again. And also, if you're interested to see me clearing some of these mid-game stages, right, definitely follow my path, my progression in this playlist, whereby I clear everything that I can in my path and try to dissect the teams to help you guys also get unstuck on these stages. This is Corky Gachas signing out.